I love deep conversations and to ask questions. Obviously, I have a podcast, or 3, actually. Lots of questions is not everyone's jam. Luckily, I realize that. My husband is actually one of the people who isn't always a fan of questions. But if you joined the last episode, you may have learned that, as well as learning how powerful vulnerability can be. In this follow-up episode, we continue our journey through the 20 questions for a year well loved, exploring communication and our shared future, providing a real-life example of how these conversations can unfold. As Robie shares more on his journey from resisting this conversation to leaning into it, you'll hear exactly how pushing past comfort can transform your relationships. These conversations don't have to happen a certain week of the year, but they are so valuable to have. And that's why we made the download available to each of you so that you can have these conversations with the people you care about most in your life. More meaningful conversations with your partner means more connection. And that is my word of the year for 2025 and something I'm hoping for you, as well as creating more of in my life. I'm glad you're here to be part of this, and I hope you download your copy and let us know what you got from having this conversation and even listen in on ours. Welcome to The Grit Show, where our focus is growth on purpose. I'm your host, Shawna Rodriguez, and I'm honored to be part of this community as we journey together with our grit intact to learn more about how to thrive and how to get the most out of life. It means a lot that you are here today. As you listen, I encourage you to think of who may appreciate the tidbits of knowledge we are sharing and to take a moment to pass this along to them. Everyone appreciates a friend that thinks of them, and these conversations are meant to be shared and to spark even more connections. We are so excited that you guys get to have a follow-up episode. So if you did not already listen to the last episode, you guys need to go back and listen to it so you can get the first half of the conversation. But we are back again with Robie Lawrence, who you probably know better as love of my life, or my husband. And he and I started last episode talking to you about 20 questions for a year well loved. And we didn't get that far because we had so many fabulous things to chat about. And we were even trying to only do half the questions. Right. Even with only half the questions and only like having one of us answer half the questions, we didn't get that far. So this is a good indication that there's 20 of them and you might want to break them up into just doing a section. Yeah.
Makes
so
sense.
You have a month of date night carved out possibly. So we went ahead and we did that question. We did 2 questions, one each for each of the categories of growth and evolution and emotional connection and challenges and resilience. And so we still have communication, understanding, and future and aspirations for us to touch on.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. And so far we found that it was kind of enjoyable doing this, right?
Yes. Surprisingly enjoyable for me.
Yes, because if you listen to the last episode, you know that Robie isn't so big on being on camera, not so big on talking publicly.
Yeah, not in general. I don't think I enjoy any of it. But the last episode I very much enjoyed. So sometimes I surprise myself.
Yes. So if you've been around, you might already be aware of the fact that Robie is very much an athlete. He grew up performing actually on the international level with wrestling and some of the stuff he pursued when he was younger. So he's used to performing athletically.
Right. I have no problem wearing a singlet. And if you know wrestling, you know what that is. So essentially nude, it feels like, in front of thousands of people doing an athletic event. No issue with that whatsoever.
No, but
speaking, having a camera right up in my face, having my picture taken, having a microphone, none of those things are very comfortable for me.
Yes, we joke about the fact that in our first 6 months together, you probably had more pictures taken of you than in the prior 20 years.
Yeah, in the first 6 months, but in the 6 years we've been together, we have eclipsed the amount of photos I had taken the previous 44 years, and by a factor
of 10 at least. At least. So he tolerates my desire to capture us together. and that I post them. So we probably haven't even talked about the fact that there's been twice now that you've been recognized in public from my social media.
From your social media, which is crazy. Yeah.
So what has that been like?
Interesting and strange to know that in the general public walking around, somebody would look at me and recognize from some social media that they pay attention to. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting phenomenon that you don't expect. Like one of them was walking into a gas station in Schmaltz?
Yeah, Schmaltz. Yeah, very rural part of Oregon.
Yeah,
very rural
part of
very rural
Oregon.
part of Oregon.
And I was recognized from Shawna's Instagram,
Yes, yes,
which is just wild. Yeah, I
Yes.
don't know.
yes. And I thought it was interesting when somebody was describing you based on seeing you on my social media. And it's very true the way they described you as being like super happy and like just saying all these things. And I see that side of you, but it's so funny that I remember when we first got together, you have this picture of you from doing running is also something that Ruby still does, not as much now, but especially before we got together. You were doing a lot of running, you did a lot of team races.
Right.
And you have this one picture of you when you're in a kilt, but you had this full beard and you looked like really, and somebody's like, I wouldn't want to mess with you. You like look like a dangerous, don't want to mess with you kind of guy. And especially when we were together, like he kind of had that don't mess with me vibe.
Yeah.
And then for people to see you on social media and you see him through my eyes, which is like this super loving, amazing, incredible, thoughtful human, which he is. But then to realize that like most people would walk into a gas station 6 years ago and see don't mess with me.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've actually thought of that a number of times. I've got a pretty good scowl.
You do.
And I was really good for a lot of years, like walking around in public with my don't mess with me, don't ask me questions scowl. That makes sense. And that was like on purpose.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want to be interacted with. And I don't have that anymore.
No, and everyone at your jobs, they love you, and Ruby's everybody's favorite. And it's really like it is who you are. Like it is who you are. But it's so funny to like know the dichotomy of like you've been through a lot and you have some walls up. And like that's when you get like, now you're just Mr. Everyone just loves you and wants to be close to you and appreciates you. And
It's interesting in that I think of myself as somebody who's open and approachable, but I'm really good when I don't want to be at projecting that. And there were plenty of times and for multiple, maybe consistent years where I was projecting very hard that I was not approachable.
Yes. Yes.
And so it is. It's fun to see. It's fun to be more open and out there with my life than I was before.
Nice.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's also really fun to look back and see just how obvious it was. How closed off I was, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But you're right. Like that picture she's talking about, people see that and they're very surprised at people who know me now see that and are very surprised at what I look like in that picture. Like I'm very aggressively anti-friendly.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, and now you're the guy that's fighting the New York Times, and the guy that gets recognized from his social media.
And people come up and talk to me, and like, that didn't happen before. Like not being out in public and having somebody just run up and ask me a question or ask if I'll help them with this or that. Like that never happened before.
And now you're letting Glow Robie. I love it. I'm very lucky to have you. Okay. So these questions are meant, and they're in the show notes. You can get your own printout of these funny questions so that you can use them with your partner so you guys can connect and reflect on the past year and kind of look ahead. We're getting to the future aspirations part, which I'm excited about. So for communication understanding, do you want to go first and ask one of these questions first from communication understanding?
Sure, I would love to. when you ask me one, you can go up instead of
Okay.
down on the list, because I'm going to skip because I saw this and I really want to know this answer. What's one thing I could communicate better?
Ooh. One thing you could communicate better.
It's a scary question to ask your partner, by the way.
Yes, but a good question. You come so far in this area. I think the first year we were together, I probably would have had a list.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So right now I'm going through all the things that you're communicating really well. So you've done such a good job about even telling me how you're wanting to react to something, and you're taking a break to not react that way. So even like, are you not only changing how you're reacting to things, but you're communicating what things you have to pause
Right.
and redirect on?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so impressive. So like, so that's like, all I could think was like, oh, much better about communicating. I think the one thing you communicate better, but I don't think that it's for a lack of being able to communicate, but a lack of you being able to figure out. I think that there's times where you get in a zone where you don't know what you want. But I think even then you're communicating with me that you don't know what you want to do. Like you aren't sure what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think you're pretty good at communicating to me that you don't know what you want to do. So I think you're doing a decent job of communicating that you don't know what you want to do. So it's less a communication piece and more like, you trying to figure out like what you want when you're in that zone. Because you have that zone where like you don't know if you want to go do something or you want to stay. And I can't figure out if you're feeling like obligated to spend time with me, but you don't want to spend time with me. So the few times we have time together. So maybe kind of communicating what's at play when you're in that zone. And maybe I communicate better that I'm wondering if it's like, is it because we have time to spend together? We don't have much time to spend together that you're feeling like you need to spend time with me, but that's not what you feel like doing. So that's why it's harder to figure out what you want to do.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. I will say along those lines, I don't think it's ever that.
Oh.
And it could be. I mean, I'm sure there's times when you want to spend time together that I wish I was doing something else. Like, that's just natural. Right?
Yeah.
But in general, it's like, I was thinking about this last night. We were watching the movie, Ennui.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I experience ennui enough. And I'm used to experiencing it alone.
Yes.
Right? And I find ways to occupy myself, but I just deal with it. But now I'm in a relationship and it pops up. It's a different experience because now you're having to handle me having that ennui experience where I'm listless and there's nothing I want to do and nothing sounds good. And it's frustrating for me about myself, but it's interesting to see how a partner responds to it. But it's interesting to find out that you think it may be me having a reaction to feeling like I need to spend time with you. Maybe 5 years ago, it would have been that way. But you are so good at letting me have my time to myself that I don't really feel that very much anymore.
Good.
I mean, I try to evaluate choosing to do something and whether or not we should be spending time together without having the obligation or feeling an obligation to spend time with you when I don't want to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think it's the right choice for a partner, myself, to think, should I be spending time with my wife who now has some free time, who's been working all day, as opposed to going and hitting balls on the simulator?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a legitimate thought that I should be having. What I don't have is I can't do this because I should be spending time with my wife.
Gotcha.
Which I don't know if I would verbalize that in a way that it's obvious that there's a difference or not.
Mm-hmm.
But there is in my head.
That's a good difference. Yeah, I think that I worry that I'm like, there's like the way our brains operate differently. And you know me, that like, if you're like, so what do you want to do today? I could like list a gazillion things. And I think that I used to always just list a gazillion things. And now I stop myself because I don't want to do any of those things.
Right.
A gazillion things I could do today.
Right.
And so I try not to list a gazillion things.
Yeah.
But there's always a gazillion things to do. And so when you're not sure you want to do, like, I can't, like, do I just go do what I want to do? Or do I wait to figure out what we want to do? Like, And so, but I have no problem with you not wanting to do anything and just being bored and not doing anything and we figure out something else to do. But I don't want to feel like I'm being dismissive of you too. So I think those are like the one things that like, I think it's harder for me to know how to communicate those times too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I never have an issue if I'm in that moment. If you're like, all right, I'm going to go do this, that would help me. In that I then wouldn't feel obligated to come up with something immediately.
Yeah.
So when you ask what I want to do and I'm telling you that I don't know of it, like I can't think of anything or nothing sounds great, I then am carrying the stress of trying to come up with something to give you an answer. Now, if you were like, all right, well, I'm going to go do this until you think of it or whatever, that totally.
I think that's something we don't communicate well.
Yeah.
Is that I'm going to do this, but feel free to interrupt me if you come up with something better. Yeah. Instead of, I think sometimes we think that the other one has moved on. Instead of like realizing we can interrupt each other. I don't think we communicate that this is temporary or this is what we want to do. Like we just kind of just like fizzle out the conversation and don't do that. So that's probably what we can communicate better. Is like, okay, this is I can go work on the garage, but I'm not married to that idea and will gladly be interrupted or whatever else. But you don't have to feel obligated to go work on the garage.
Right.
Like something like that. Like I think I could communicate that better too. Like that's the way we could communicate a little better. It's like, or I'm gonna go hit some balls, but like I can interrupt at any time, or like I really just need to focus in the garage and give me some space for a while. And I appreciate that. So like kind of like naming where we're at with those.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. Because sometimes we kind of just like, I'm just gonna do something and like not to decide is to decide. It's kind of where we end up with.
Right.
Things,
yeah. It's interesting because I feel like I don't need a goal or something to do all the time. And I think you strive a little more for you have so much in your life that it's harder for you to be without goal.
Yes.
Or, if that makes sense. And so, it's just an interesting dynamic on the communicating that I don't even know how to communicate. That's why it's hard for me when I feel it. Right? I don't even know how to communicate other than being like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, don't give me 6 options because I'm not going to be able to choose one.
Yeah.
Like, I am equally as fine with any of the options, but I don't want to have to choose one.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Because I think I'm pretty good. If I want to do one, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I'm better than I used to be, at least.
Yeah.
Or I'll tell you that 3 of those sound great. Those 2 I really don't want to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's interesting.
Yeah. That's the only thing I can think of and it's probably partially because I need to communicate it better. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
How about what topic deserved more of our attention this year?
Nothing comes to mind. I'm going to talk for a bit and hope something pops into my head because I feel like we do a pretty good job of talking about things that come up. I feel like we've both become pretty good communicators. I feel like we both value ourselves enough that we stand up for ourselves when we feel the need to each other. And we both are pretty good at expressing our needs and desires in our relationship. And it's taken growth to get there, especially for me. I'm not always good at communicating my desires. And then after being frustrated for X amount of time, then I explode and it comes out in a negative way. And I feel like that happened a lot more often early in our relationship. And I don't feel that. And learning to be okay that I want X or Y, and B, communicating that directly is not a negative thing.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a positive thing. What that has done for me is just make me much more open about how I'm feeling about something.
Yeah. The interesting thing about like even that phrasing is that I think one of the things that we do well is giving the right amount of attention.
Okay.
I think that one of the secrets of our relationship is that we put things out there and then we let them go to some extent. Like we can share how we feel about something or a frustration with something, and then not have to be attached to the outcome or know that it has to be resolved or be like, this is the way that it is. So if I'm frustrated with something about your job, or if you're frustrated with how I'm working or how late I'm working, or which you're actually really good about not being too frustrated about that, but if it was a frustration for you, or that we could communicate that and then kind of let go, the other person understanding how we feel about something is enough,
Right.
without it having to be like held like a knife at each other's throats all the time.
Right.
Because I think that sometimes in other relationships that people hold things against them all the time. I don't know if it's because they don't feel heard or if they can't accept that things are the way that they are.
I'm wondering if it's not more that we're both pretty secure in ourselves. And I feel like I don't have to convince you to think like I do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are trying to convince their partner to think like they do.
Yeah.
And if I was insecure in our relationship, or if I was insecure in who I am, I would probably feel the need to like pester you on an issue and want you to think about it the same way I do.
Yeah.
And I don't have that need. Like, you don't have to agree with me and think about something the way I do. And I don't feel like you need me to agree with you on a topic, whatever topic it is, either. Like, we're okay with each other having a different opinion or thought on an issue, whether it's a big issue or a small issue. Now, obviously, there are some issues that need resolved if they were major, but in general, we're comfortable enough in our relationship and in ourselves that I don't feel we harp on things with the need for the other to agree with us.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it. I hadn't seen it that way. And I think that that's probably really the key to it. And I think, do you mind me sharing like the example of your days off?
Oh, yeah.
That example is that because Robie has 4 days, he works. And for him, the ideal day off is Wednesday, right in the middle of the week. So work 2 days on, 2 days off. And I love to travel. I like weekends away. And I get why he doesn't want to have a Monday or Friday off.
Right.
And so in our relationship at past jobs, like I proposed Tuesday as an option, because then if there's a Monday holiday, so he still wants that Wednesday.
Right.
But Tuesday is great because there's a Monday holiday, 4-day weekend. We could take advantage of Monday holidays and be gone Saturday to Tuesday, cheapest flights, if we're flying somewhere, like best days for traffic is Saturday and Tuesday. Like we could take advantage of those long weekends. And so he was able to see that logic. Mm-hmm. If he hadn't stuck to Wednesdays, I'd have been a little, but I wouldn't have taken it personally or like complained about it to everyone I talked to for 10 years. Like somebody, like, otherwise she just might have. And in the end, he was able to do Tuesdays off at that job at that time. And so this current position, there's been a lot of moving around with days off and times off and whatever else. And currently Wednesdays was the option, and then Wednesdays wasn't the option. And then it was moved to Mondays, not by his deciding. And Mondays are the worst days for a lot of reasons, but my hardest days with my jobs. And when he has his day off, he does often golf on his days off. A lot of times we'll hit a happy hour, and I'll try to get off work early so we can go to a happy hour on his days off, because he works late on the days he does work, because he has 10-hour days. And so I'll try to do that. And like Mondays are the worst. Right? Yeah, I have meetings every Monday from like 4 o'clock to 6 p.m. So like, no way to connect on those days. And it's just not ideal, because I can't take long weekends on those days and whatever else. And so I was really disappointed when that happened, and things worked out. He was able to get, and for Monday holidays, he would not get Monday holidays. He would just get an extra day of pay for those weeks. So he would get 2 days off, and we both value time off more than extra in the bank. And it was able to work out that he can have Fridays off, which are better for us to have some time. That's better for ideal, which is really nice to know that with that, I'm not going to because he doesn't always get what he wants to work either, but I'm not going to hold against him. He's always getting what he wants off, but that he's able to take my thoughts and opinions and sharing them, but not taking it personally if that doesn't work out for him.
Right.
So it's like, that's like an example of ways that we're able to the right amount of attention.
Yes.
Share stuff against it and try to work the best, but be able to do that. I'm so excited when you moved to Tuesdays instead of Wednesdays when that worked out, because it was nice for our weekends, even though it wasn't your favorite.
Right.
So yes, I appreciate it.
And I was willing to make that change. It's minimal, right? For me, ultimately, Tuesday versus Wednesday doesn't make that big of a difference. Still, Yes, I prefer Wednesdays. It's like the perfect midweek day off. But being able to change that and making it better for us on the weeks we do travel is totally worth it.
Yes.
And then when when the opportunity was no longer there, then we have to settle with what it is.
Yes.
Again, not ideal, but I'll make it work.
Yes. And the fact that we can definitely understand that we're all on the same team for those things instead of.
It's not contentious.
Yes.
Again, we're a team. We're not battling each other.
Yes. We're so lucky we're a team.
I agree.
Yes. I'm glad we choose each other.
Me too. Every day.
Every day. Yes. So, future and aspirations. And I think it's your turn to ask. We get talking, so I forget.
I will ask. I like this question. So, what excites you most about our future together?
Oh, it's interesting to go back and like listen to podcast episodes because the fact that I talked about, we had a name for it at one time, like this house, like moving from our Haven and Selwood to this house to have more space and to have those pieces that we have here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for us to get to the house we're going to eventually have, the next house that we buy, and we literally get those pieces done. Like I'm excited for that chapter for us when things are a little bit more settled and we are able to travel a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great because I can see that for us. And I get excited because I can see that for us. I love that one of the great things about our future is also our present.
Mm-hmm.
And that we do make time for travel and we do make time for our connection and we do make time in the space that we have now that I can so clearly see our future because so much of it is in our present.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing that excites me the most about our future is that it's so clear in our present that it's going to be there. So I get excited about more travel and the places we're going to go and the places we're going to see and the adventures we're going to go on together. And then having this haven that we kind of have a little bit more backyard space. It was set up so we can have our outdoor space and more of my gardening, our fire pit and entertaining outside and more of that type of stuff that I'm excited to have.
Mm-hmm.
But I love it that we already have so much of that integrated into our current space and life that it makes it feel so tangible.
All right. That's good. I like that.
Yes. We take our little adventures to Seattle or to the coast, or it's kind of interesting to look back on, even though this is like our year of the least travel. We've done our year of the least travel.
Yeah, it's funny that you think of it as the year, or you call it the year of our least travel, because I will tell you how often my coworkers say they wish they lived my life because of how often we do things and travel. And that's our least traveled year.
Our least traveled year, exactly.
I find that fascinating. And as you know, but the listeners who are watching this don't know, I did not travel for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
The only time I would ever leave the valley where I lived was to go to a race to run. And I only flew a few times, but in general, it was somewhere that was drivable.
Mm-hmm.
And since we've been together, yeah, I've been traveling like crazy again, and it's so much fun. I love it.
Like our adventures.
I wouldn't do that without you, and I think you know that. But I don't know if I've ever expressed it to you how much I appreciate it, because I would not do any of it just because I wouldn't take the time or the effort put in to set things up. I think the one time I've set up a trip for us since we've been together was San Diego a few Christmases ago. Yes. And I do not relish the experience of planning a vacation for me, let alone for somebody, because I will just roll with any mistakes that happen once I get on a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm alone, I don't have to worry about how that affects the person I'm with. Increase my stress by tenfold by having a partner that I care about, who I want to be happy and enjoy herself, and then have me try to plan that vacation. Because if things go awry, I'm going to take personal ownership over the fact that it went awry, even if it wasn't my fault.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, anyway, I enjoy that I get to travel, and very little of my emotional involvement is in setting it up to make sure you have a good time.
Which, as a side note, at your holiday party at your work, I had at least three people comment to me about me planning our travel, which is so funny because I've never had that many people that talk to me about me and my. I do travel a lot, and I do plan a lot of travel.
We
It was
do.
very exciting to see people surprised and impressed. I had so many comments and questions about it. It was funny.
I think that what you may or may not understand is I hope you all can tell how much I love my wife and appreciate her. Mhm. My coworkers are probably sick and tired of me talking about how awesome you are and how much I love the things that you do, like plan travel and that it's okay that one of us is a planner and one of us is not. I think that's what they hear about more
Mhm.
is that you are detail oriented and I'm less so. But I appreciate that you're detail oriented. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't like it's not a bone of contention for us that we
Yeah.
are so different in terms of planning. Example is when we travel, Shawna has many more things to pack than I do.
Yes. I do not travel light.
And pretty much regardless of where we go, I'm going to be fine with a backpack.
Yes.
Regardless
Yes.
of the amount of
Shockingly
time
small.
or the distance we're traveling or the country we go to, I'm going to be fine with a backpack. Part of that is if I forget something or if I get
Yes.
somewhere and I recognize I need something I didn't pack, I'm perfectly fine going and buying it.
Mhm.
Shauna doesn't like to have to buy something she already has
Yes.
and know that she's now going to have an extra that if she just would have packed the correct thing, she wouldn't have had to do that. So we have a different response to that, right?
Yes.
But I talk about that at work all the
Yeah.
time, how much I appreciate your detail and how much I find out we have this amazing hotel that I didn't even know existed that you booked us. And then I tell people about how awesome that hotel was. My coworkers, I hope they're not too
No, I love it. I love it. It also helps me realize too that part of it too is you also live in a place that's hard to travel from,
Right.
which I've noted as well. And so like traveling from here is acknowledged more than I live in
Right.
other places.
Yes.
I've lived like Boston and Portland and places where a lot of people I know travel and travel happens more frequently where it's it is complicated to travel from here. So a lot less travel happens from here.
Yeah.
So yeah. And our last trip to Las Vegas included like flying out of where we live and flying into another city instead of having a one-way car. Like, so it's more complicated.
It is
here.
more
But
complicated.
everyone was like, how did you? That wasn't even an option. And I was like, I'm resourceful. When I want to go places, I make it happen.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Okay. So, what's something I could do in the coming year that would make you feel more seen or appreciated?
See, I feel like that's a bad question. I say that in a joking way,
Uh-huh.
in that one of the reasons I have such joy in my relationship is because you, whether you do it on purpose or not, and I think you do it on purpose, actively try to make me feel more seen and appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I could have ever been in a relationship or chosen to marry somebody without that.
Mm.
I'm trying to think of ways to give you an example, but I will use my geekery as an example.
Uh-huh.
I love all things Star Wars, Marvel, comic books, science fiction, fantasy, video games, what I call assorted geekery. And some people have a spouse who would either A, belittle that to their friends, or B, tolerate it for their spouse. But you have chosen to embrace it and encourage me to do more assorted geekery things, whether it's travel to BlizzCon or whatever con I decide I want to go to, or remind me that a movie's coming out that you have no interest in whatsoever, but you really are finding friends for me to go watch with, which obviously benefits you so you don't have to go. But at the same time, you're encouraging me to go watch it as opposed to rolling your eyes that I'm wasting time going to watch something that you have no interest in. Anyway, and that's surface level thing. Sorry, I'm having a spasm in my calf at the moment. Doesn't feel good. And that's a surface level thing. But on a deeper level, you have shown a willingness to listen to me on deeper emotional level things and given me the freedom to have those feelings and deal with those feelings in such a way that I now feel comfortable that I have them and that I can share them and that I can work my way through them and then move beyond that, which I find fascinating and amazing, and I didn't even know was possible. So I would say keep doing what you're doing, and it will help me feel more appreciated and seen because it's never ending as a person, let alone as a spouse. Like, I can always be better at what I'm doing, but I think sometimes it's easy to forget that we just need to keep what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that I didn't do more. He did an amazing Christmas tree this year because we take turns doing the Christmas tree, and it was this amazing Darth Vader tree. And I intended to post videos on it and tell more people about it. One of my friends was sharing it all over the East Coast, and yet I didn't even send it. Like, BJ would love that tree.
Oh,
I didn't even
yeah.
share it with my friends and be nearly as good with it as I should have could have. So sometimes I feel like I don't do enough to support you and do
You
this thing.
support me so much that I can't imagine you would ever feel that way.
Oh,
So that's funny.
you are.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't feel that at all, that you don't support me in whatever it is. I feel pretty supported.
Oh, good. It's good to know that you're feeling it, even if I want to be doing more. So I was supposed to do the last question, question 20.
Sure.
It's a good question. Is what's one thing you hope we'll accomplish together this year? Because I think that's a great thing to end on.
It sort of ties into the end of the last question, and that what I want us to accomplish is just to continue to be open and accepting, and I don't know, just continue the path that we're on, which I feel is a very healthy relationship, and the willingness to allow each other to not just succeed, but also fail occasionally. And that's okay. Like, I cannot be the perfect partner for you. I might be your perfect partner, but I can never be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And you allow me to fail at being a perfect partner. And I need that. Because if you expected or didn't allow that, or were angry with me for failing, it would just ruin me. Because seeing you that distraught over my inability would be a terrible thing. That even makes any sense
That
whatsoever.
does make sense. Do you think that's a newer thought for you? Do you feel like in the beginning you felt like you had to be a perfect partner?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
that's growth. That's
That's
5 or 6 years of us being together.
okay. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. But I had to fail and see you react in a way that I did not expect or even know was possible from a partner multiple times before it even started to sink in that it was okay. I feel like, other than random occurrences, that I will extend grace to people,
mm-hmm.
a lot of rope for people. I do not do that for myself very well.
Mm-hmm.
I expect a lot of perfection out of myself.
You do.
And you have helped me understand, A, that's not a healthy way to be towards myself. But also that it's okay. It's okay that I'm not perfect in every way, shape, and form, which I never thought I was, but trying to hold myself to a standard.
Yes.
Right? That it's okay. And I think, yeah, it wasn't any one moment. It was a consistent acceptance from you that I am a person with flaws before I even started to realize that it was okay.
I love you so much.
I love you.
I know, it's so wonderful to hear you saying that. And I'm like, wait, this is new. It's just new. Like, this is amazing.
Probably in the last year. Again, probably since we got married. And I mean, I'm sure I was thinking about this before then, but I'm sure it solidified when you actually chose to marry me. So the answer as to why there's wedding low Robie is very deep emotional acceptance.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
I think so.
There's a reason you're so positive.
There is, yes, and we haven't talked about that reason. We haven't had that discussion. I've had a lot of thoughts about it, like personal, like spending time trying to get to the bottom of it, because I enjoy it. And let's be honest, it's easy. This is going to dive into some other parts of it. It's easier to be alone when your choices aren't going to impact somebody else. it's much more difficult to have a partner where your choices are actually impactful to them and their well-being.
Yeah.
And it's hard for somebody who was choosing not to have a partner for as long as I did to then choose somebody and be okay with that. And it took me a long time in our relationship to get over that fear of choosing something that was going to impact the other person, and realize that it's okay. For example, big example, moving to Bend. I had had enough of the experience of being in Portland for the job and everything else.
Yeah.
And wanted to move to Bend. You accepted that and moved here. Whole story involving there. It took me a long time to be okay with Bend not being perfect after you chose to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like anything that wasn't perfect about Bend when you got here was a reflection on me pulling you away from where you were happy. I still struggle with that. I hate it when there's something about this place that you don't like, because there's still that part of me that feels like you're here because of me. I made a choice that made my spouse unhappy. That sucks. That makes sense. And it took plenty of time with being here and having those, but also to understand that, like, you chose this and we're here together, good and bad.
Yeah.
You know, and it's okay for you to express unhappiness.
Yes.
And it's okay that I chose a place that's not perfect.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And no place would be perfect.
No, there's always going to be something.
Yes. No place would be perfect. Just like Portland wasn't perfect for you.
Right.
And I never took that personally.
Yeah.
Whereas if I had taken that personally, that would have been detrimental to our relationship.
Right.
Yes. Or if you took it personally, or if I couldn't complain about Bend
Right.
and had to bottle that up, that would be detrimental to our relationship as well.
Right.
And so and that's a good example of how we can let those things be. That both of us, you have to not take it personally when I don't like Bend.
Right.
And I have to not blame you when I don't like Bend. Like that's like individual work on both of us. Just like when you came to Portland, if you don't like something about Portland, you didn't blame me for things you like about Portland. And I didn't take it personally if you don't like something about Portland. And I think a lot of relationships, people don't separate those things. And it takes both people being able to separate those things out.
Yeah. We don't blame each other for our unhappiness.
Yes.
And I think that's important, because I think a lot of people blame their partner for their unhappiness for whatever reason. And I feel like as soon as you do that, you start building animosity.
Yes.
Because it's the other person's fault you're not happy.
Yes.
Then they become not the enemy necessarily, but they become the focal point for your unhappiness.
Yeah.
And then it just grows from there, right? It feels like it.
Yeah.
I think we don't have that. And I think of you as the reason for my happiness. And anyway, I just find that interesting that there's so many people who find their spouses the reason for their unhappiness, as opposed to looking for what it is that their spouse has done that makes them happy.
Yes.
Because if I think of the positives and I focus on the things that I know you have done for me, I think that's way better than trying to think about the things you've done that for whatever reason have ended up less well for me.
Yes.
You know, I don't know.
I think part of it too is like looking at something fully and wholly, if that makes sense. That when we look at, so I'm aware that I love snickerdoodle cookies, but snickerdoodle cookies maybe will give me a sugar high when I have them, and then I'll crash afterwards. But I still love snickerdoodle cookies, and she's happy anyway. So it's not just snickerdoodle cookies. Like, choose not to have snickerdoodle cookies and not have that crash, right?
Right.
So you like accept something fully. And like, it's the same as your partner. It's the same as your job. It's the same as all these things. Like, you have to fully choose the things in your life and take ownership for the things you choose to have in your life. And that goes with the people, the job, the food, that everything you're choosing to have in your life, instead of like fully negatively or fully positively, like choosing to ignore the negative side effect or choosing to blame the negative side effects when, well, you chose to eat the cookies. So you chose to have the negative side effects. And like those type of people don't like look at the full picture when they're doing things. And so I think that that's the challenge of doing that and understanding, like, I would 100% choose you and then like is worth like all those other pieces. And then I need to look at what I don't like about Ben. And if I feel like it doesn't make me feel more isolated or else, then I need to figure out ways to find more connection in my life. And if I don't like the travel thing, then I have to figure out a way to work on the travel thing. And like, why do I like travel so much? Because it lets me get away from my life. Well, then I need to figure out how to get away from my life without leaving my house. Then. Like, what do I need to do to get those things that I'm missing here? Because I want to be here and be with you. And so that's what I'm choosing.
Yeah.
So we take ownership for our decisions and how to work those things around. It's kind of like the other way you can do it of blaming somebody else and letting that eat away at you.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I think it's harder to take ownership of you being the reason for your happiness or unhappiness. It's easier to blame somebody else.
Yes.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. If you're looking through the prism of acceptance as opposed to blame.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult, right? The person that you're spending the most time with, that you're most emotionally connected with, is the easiest person to assign blame.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. No, I just find that fascinating. And it took growth. I'm talking about myself in particular. I love that I'm now at a point where when you talk about things you don't like specifically about the Bend area, I'm not immediately defensive because I'm not ownership of that.
Yes.
But it took me a while to recognize that I get defensive because I feel like I made the choice to bring us here. But it took spending some time trying to understand why I get defensive when you refer to things you don't like about the area when we first moved here, right? And then it took some time like unraveling the why I feel defensive, why I want you to be so happy, why it took a while to get through all that.
Yeah, I think this is a great place for us to remind anyone listening that you and I first made eye contact when I was 14 and you were 16.
Years and years ago.
Kissed when I was 14 and you were 16. And if you and I would have had the relationship that at one point in time we've had this conversation that in our early 20s, like we reconnected and that would have been like this time where could have lamented of our lives, we've been connected then, we would have destroyed each other.
It would have been so miserably terrible.
Destroyed each other because we would have for everything.
Absolutely.
So this isn't you and I have learned a lot of lessons in our lives and we have come through a lot of hard paths to be who we are, to be in the relationship we're in. And we have no room to judge anyone doing all those things because we've done all those things with other partners.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we do have this story that involves us starting at 14 and 16. And people have asked me, like, do you regret that you guys didn't get together, like get married when you were in your 20s or whatever? And I don't regret that for anything because you're right.
We would have destroyed.
It would have been a very miserable situation. And I don't know about Shawna, but it took me a good 30 years to be ready for a relationship like this.
Yes.
I would have liked that to be accomplished much quicker.
Yeah, we love fairy tale. We would have been this involved, and we just would have made we would have destroyed each other.
We would have, and
blamed each other fully for all the things.
Yeah, it absolutely would have been your fault. In my head, I would have believed that. And it would have taken so many years to realize that maybe I was to blame here.
I don't know. Do you think would we have? I don't know. I think we did just enough damage to each other in our passing through each other's lives, being scared to admit to each other, being scared if we could hurt each other. And we can see the role each of us played now and see it. I think if we would have spent enough time, if we would have fought for each other, we would have destroyed each other. And I feel like it's really hard to untangle all that. Don't you think?
As much as I like to imagine the awesomeness of being together at that age, I don't like to imagine the terribleness of the destruction of each other's psyches and emotional consciousness. It could have been otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That to bring up like People, communication is so important. So important. Neither one of us communicated in effective ways at all.
At all.
Like,
We're so self-protective and
so
so
yes, anyway, anybody who doesn't know the story, just know that lack of communication multiple times over the 30 years of us knowing each other was a big cause of pushing each other away.
yeah.
And each of us learning to communicate to our partner and about our own needs is at least a part of what allowed us to have a very fulfilling relationship.
Yes. And we know how lucky we are.
Oh,
And we
absolutely.
know how amazing this is. We totally do. Yes. Yes, we do. We do. Yes. So, my one thing that I hope we'll accomplish together this year, I mean, just one thing. I think that continuing this and growing the way that we're growing. I don't know why we keep surpassing my expectations. So, like, it's like hard to imagine like how things will continue to change and grow and evolve. The one thing I hope we'll accomplish together is we're going to finish the painting from the wedding. That's one thing, like the one tangible thing that before
the end of 2025,
we will finish that.
Ooh, is that a challenge so that you and I do a podcast episode at the end of 2025 and we hold up the finished painting so that your audience can see
the
that
finished
we
painting. So that will be the one thing that we'll accomplish together this year is that painting.
And that doesn't mean, this is for me, not for you, that on the 25th of December 2025, I'm scrambling to paint 90% of the painting that I haven't done yet.
I like you chose the 25th. The 25th of the 2025 is Christmas, do you?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's why I chose that. Yeah, I chose that because that's when I would be thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to do this podcast. And I haven't done any of the painting that I said I would do.
Yes, because everything else, because we have a lot up in the air, like with our living situations a little bit up in the air, like different stuff with our travels up in the air. Like we have a lot of stuff up in the air. So it's interesting. I think that other years, like last year we accomplished a wedding. The year before that, we accomplished moving to Bend, selling a house, barely sold the house the year before because there's a lot of getting that done. So like we've accomplished a lot in the last few years with selling houses, moving, weddings. So I feel like this year finishing a painting feels like a really big accomplishment.
It does, but I like the challenge to do it.
I'll do that. So that will be our accomplishment for this year. That's what I would like for us to accomplish together this year. So I like that. And again, less travel from Bend. So I'm not going to put any big travel plans on it. So for 2026, I have big travel plans for us. But yeah, I think that's what I want us to accomplish together this year.
All right.
Sounds good. And because this is the Grit Show, and this is your first time being on the Grit Show.
Yeah.
We always have to ask about your self-maintenance, like what you do for self-care, which I didn't prep you for this at all.
You did not, but I think the answer is somewhat obvious because I talked about it before, is I don't meditate or read scripture or anything like that. I play golf. And for me, golf is time out of my week that I get to spend away from everything else. Even if it's a course in the middle of a city, I'm in nature. There's always animals on the course. I've come home with pictures of giant deer, bunnies, wolves, coyotes, and it's grass and trees and lakes and fish. And it is
January. So my curiosity is, for your self-maintenance, is a simulator like as effective as going to, like, today? This weekend, you did go to a golf course, even though it was luckily before the snow. You managed to make that happen. Like, so is your self-maintenance going to be making sure that you get to a golf course, get somewhere where there's not snow on the ground? Because in Bend, like, difficult, and it happens more in January, February. Is that going to be making sure that you get somewhere at least once a month or twice a month where you can actually get outside and golf, or is getting to the simulator twice a week going to be enough? Like, when you can't get outside as much, because you're really good about weekly golfing when the weather's better, but we live somewhere that's not the case as much. So
it's a little different trying to golf in
that time of year.
So off the top of my head, my thought is just knowing where the closest golf course is to go to that the weather would be most likely to be okay. And you ask about the simulator and is that enough? Not really, but it's a pretty reasonable facsimile.
Mm-hmm.
I can go into the garage and put on the simulator and not be interrupted. Yes, and that is helpful.
Yeah.
But it's not
the same as like being out in nature and yeah.
And as you ask about traveling to places that are a little bit better weather, getting out of Bend to places that are better is difficult, right? Because of the same snow, which prevents me from golfing here, having to drive over a mountain pass in the snow is something that will prevent me from wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's a stress I don't necessarily want to have. It does bring to mind that traveling east is not a bad option to consider. Now, I don't, other than Prineville, I don't know what the weather's like anywhere beyond that, because I know as you get further east, then it gets colder, right?
Yeah.
I used to live in Grand, and it was freezing all the time in the wintertime. So, yeah, I think that might require flights with the two of us to locations in the U.S. that have sun.
So we need to go to San Diego, huh?
Or Arizona. You know?
All right.
But I think at the moment, I think there's so few days where it's that bad in this area that it doesn't become an issue. It didn't last year. And so far this year, I'm bummed that so many courses shut down for the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's at least 2 that stay open, except for the days where it's just as impossible for them to be able to open for golf.
Well, there you go. Well, that's good to know that you've discovered you do need to be out and the simulator is not enough.
It's true.
And how often do you feel like you need to be, like, weekly?
To go out and golf?
Yeah.
So my preference is weekly. I think after going out yesterday and not going out, since I guess Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Right? I would say that's about the maximum I want to go without doing it, because I can feel it building up.
Yeah.
The need for it building up, if that makes sense. Because as I've said, it's my one place in my life to be fully present and not have distractions and stress from other parts of my life.
Yeah.
And you forget how important that is until you're away from it long enough and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to find a way.
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
And how about, do you answer the same question? I'm curious.
No, I always ask my guests. So when I do solo episodes, I'll answer my self-maintenance or what I've been doing for self-maintenance. But usually it's something we get to hear from the guests so that folks can have different ways of thinking about how they do self-maintenance.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, but thank you for asking. I appreciate that you care about me and my self-maintenance.
A little bit.
Very caring. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for doing this. I love this conversation. And for everyone listening, again, there's 20 of these. We only scratch the surface really on and all these Christians. So definitely get these and download these and share these with your partner and spend some time diving into these to just kind of reflect on the last year and look at the year ahead and forge those connections. I mean, I know I learned some great things from this conversation.
I did as well. Now, the other thing to mention, and I think I mentioned this early on, maybe multiple times, if this sounds like something your partner has no interest in doing, let them know that I was very not interested in doing this. And it took some time for me to recognize it was fear and then want to address that fear by things that make me afraid or things I need to do. And so I was like, all right, I'm afraid of this, so I better step in and do it. Now I'll be less afraid next time because this has been fun and easier than I thought it would be.
Nice.
So it's okay to be afraid, but it's also okay to embrace that fear and still do it.
So do it. That's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much for being part of this. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
I value the time we shared together today. Thank you for making time to be here and to continue taking steps towards growth and bringing more ease into your life. I'd love for us to stay connected on Instagram at Shawna Podcasts or at the.grit.show. There's even a link in bio at the.grit.show where you can send me an email to let me know what you thought today's episode. Hearing from you helps to make the effort that goes into producing these episodes worthwhile. After all, you're why I'm here. And since it's been a while since you've heard this, you are the only one of you that this world has got. And that really does mean something. I hope you realize that. I'll be back again soon, and I hope you're following along or subscribed so that you'll know and be here too.